Clearly there's something in my subconscious to do with people being chained up by the ankle.
People like to watch me cry for some reason. I don't know why.
Sounded like an animal. But I swear to God, it was standing on 2 feet.
Hi, Julia. Congratulations on the film. I found it such a fresh and clever take on this particular subgenre. I think what really drew me in is that it really builds on the tragedy of this. It's the lack of inability to communicate between Blake and Charlotte and how the illness affects that. What was your particular way into that relationship and Charlotte? Because obviously a lot has already passed by the time we get to know them in the film.
Very early on, Chris and Leigh and I, we all discussed the process and the journey, the marital journey, in a way, and during rehearsals. But very early on, I told Leigh that I always when I read it, I kind of read it that it had like the 7 stages of grief in a way. And I knew that it was going to take place in one night. So I kind of wanted the audience to, what I was hoping is that the audience would feel that it was like almost the 7 stages of grief in one night. And it should feel almost like a disease, an illness, and that's out of the family's control. And they're, dealing with the loss of that. And with that is the 7 stages of grief.
I feel it's also like the 7 stages almost of the transformation as well, because
Yes.
they do such great work in building it up. And Leigh is a filmmaker who loves the physical visual effects if you can. Does that help when you're literally playing across it and you're not trying to pretend what Chris looks like? You know how it's going to look in the final result.
Oh, it always helps. Pretty much all of acting is just prep work, and then you get there on the day, and then it just becomes reality. It doesn't become prep work anymore. That's the hard but fun work, is the reality of it all. Even though it's not fun sometimes. Sometimes it's exhausting. In this case, it was exhausting.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you've got experience in these kind of horror movies, so did you at least know what you were going in for? Because you've got to be on such a high emotional level all the time. It must be...
Well, what's funny is like I'm in high emotional level even when I'm like not in horror films, so I'm just kind of like used to being in that state like all the time. The only time I'm not in that state is when I'm not working or for a press junket. But other than that, people like to watch me cry for some reason. I don't know why.
we'll get you on a rom-com next or something like that,
Yes, please. I would love to do a rom-com. I would love to do something like a Moonstruck. I mean, it's like my favorite movie, so.
Yeah, I love how this movie puts us in the view of Blake as he's going through all the illness. But on set, how was that realised as well? Were there some parts where you literally couldn't see a thing as Charlotte, or was it still a bit movie magic?
So what they did, and Leigh and Stefan, the DP, the photographer, they, is so talented. So they were a great duo together, and basically we would, have the scene, and I wouldn't be moving, but I would just be standing or sitting or staying still, and they would move the camera in like a circle, like in a circular kind of, almost like a dance in a way. And then when it went on to my coverage, it was, they would have a blue light and then they would have a white light. And so they just switched the lights, and they just kind of, you kind of had to just time it out basically and be ready when when it was on, the light was shining on you. Yeah.
Hi Leigh, congratulations on the film. Found it a really clever and fresh take on this particular character and Universal monster. I was wondering, because obviously you were offered this back in 2020, shortly after Invisible Man, and then obviously it went through various development phases. But because you were so fresh off Invisible Man, was there a particular thing that you either did or didn't want to take on if you were going to adapt another Universal monster?
I don't think there was anything particular. I remember thinking, okay, now I want to do something that's in a completely different genre. I've just made a horror film. I would like to do something a bit more comedic, or, you always want to pivot a little bit. And so when Universal first suggested Wolfman, I was a little resistant, but the thing is, it's really the idea about how to make the film that leads me. So unfortunately, once they put that name out there, I started thinking about, well, how would I do this? And then I had this idea about perspective and being able to use sound and light to convey the transformation. Once that was in there, I was like, all right, I guess I'm making this movie.
It sort of feels like in some ways it is a slightly different genre to Invisible Man. It is still obviously a horror film first and foremost, but there's that family drama and that inability to communicate that comes from this infection as well. So did you always have that? Was that part of that original spark of the idea of how it breaks down a relationship in some ways as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was really thinking about what the Wolfman is. You know, it's a story of transformation. It's a disease, and so I was just thinking about that and what that looks like in real life. You know, I've had people close to me suffer from degenerative illnesses and in some case terminal illnesses, and you see this slow motion horror story that unfolds. And so I was thinking a lot about that thematically. The first draft was written during COVID, and there was all that uncertainty during that time. The world was off its axis. It was a bizarre time, as you would remember, and a scary time. So it's really cathartic to make something. I wouldn't call this a COVID movie, but it was definitely written during that time and is kind of infused with that feeling that was all around us at that time.
Yeah, I think it really leans into that tragedy of the Wolfman, especially with the point of view changes. Did you always know exactly how they were going to look and feel? Because it's superb.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I had an idea. I didn't know exactly how it looked, but usually what happens is I'll have an idea about how something should work, and then I'll call Stefan Duccio, who's the cinematographer that I work with. You know, he shot Upgrade, he did Invisible Man. This is our 4th film together. So I call him and kind of make it his problem and say, okay, how would we shoot this? So as I was writing, he was spending months researching UV cameras, infrared cameras. He was looking into all sorts of ways to visually present wolf vision, for lack of a better term. That's what we called it on set. So it's really fun. I wouldn't say I exactly had it in my mind, though. I think it took us a while to arrive where we ended up arriving.
Without going into spoilers, obviously, but there's a moment in this involving a bear trap and a foot, and I couldn't help but think of, was it an intentional throwback / homage to obviously Saw, which broke you through into the horror community, as it were?
Yeah, it was actually. It wasn't like I was like, yeah, I'm going to build a sequence around this just for that purpose. But as I was writing it, I realized, oh, this is going back to a seminal work for me. And I liked that aspect of it. You know, clearly there's something in my subconscious to do with people being chained up by the ankle. But I love that. I love when a film is kind of infused with recurring thematics in a body of work. You know, if you look at someone like, I don't know, Tarantino or Scorsese or David Fincher, you start to see these certain things recurring in their work, objects or ways of shooting things. And I kind of love that. As a film lover, I'm always looking out for that. So when it comes to my own movies, I'm thinking about the audience and I'm thinking about these little nods to other things I've done.